I had a very unusual experience this morning. I was listening to The Naked Communist talking about Karl Marx and communism by Cleon Skousen. And while I was listening to it, and he was talking about Karl Marx's life and how he was always begging other people for money, and he couldn't even support his own family. And two of his daughters ended up committing suicide. His family was just crumbling apart. Meanwhile, the whole time he was up in the attic, and he was at the university in the library trying to study how to solve the world's problems. In the meantime, his own family was just crumbling, and it was so sad. His wife was so sad. He was so sad. Everyone around him was so sad. However, he kept on saying that stuff wasn't as important as solving the world's problems. And there's actually a scripture in the Bible that says he who can't keep his own house clean should not be over the church. It's something to that level. They should not be leading the church if they can't lead their own home in being clean. Well, I had a strange connection between Karl Marx and Stephen Covey, and this is kind of how it goes. So I'm sure you've heard of the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't, please go ahead and get the copy. But here are the 7 habits. It's 1, be productive. 2, begin with the end in mind. 3, put first things first. 4, think win-win. 5, seek first to understand, then be understood. 6, synergize. 7, sharpen the saw. Now, at the end of the book, he explains that the first 3 habits are to become independent, meaning that I am able to do things on my own. The first stage before independence is actually dependence, where I am dependent on, I have to have someone else do something for me. For example, we have 2 little kids. When they're a baby, they cannot feed themselves. They cannot open the refrigerator themselves. They cannot get the plates out themselves. They're dependent on everything. So it's not necessarily bad. However, there are different stages that are higher levels. So the first level is dependency. And everyone starts out dependent as a baby. Now, the goal is to teach independence so that they can get their own food, so that they can turn on the heater or the cooler if they're hot or cold. They can make their own lunch. They can learn. They're able to learn on their own. They're able to do everything on their own. Now, I was raised thinking that was the highest level, that independence was the highest level. And that's what Stephen Covey says are these first 3 habits. Be productive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first. Those are a few of the habits in order to become independent, okay? Then the next level that's even higher than independence, can you guess what it is? It's interdependence. And for the longest time, I didn't understand what interdependence was. Interdependence just means that you're able to work as a team with other people. Now, an example is an independent person and an independent person come together to work together to make even better things, even greater things. An example he provides in the book is a man and a woman coming together, getting married, and then they're able to create children, create even more. So 1 + 1 equals 3 or 4 or 5 or more people, right? That's one example in the book. That 1 and 1, I'm sure you've heard the example of the oxen, that an ox, 2 ox separate can only pull, let's say, 2,000 pounds. However, when you put them together, they can actually pull 3,000 pounds. They can pull more weight together than they can separated. It's just a crazy, it's a crazy idea, but it actually works. And I'm sure if you've ever been a part of any productive team, that you'll be able to attest that you are able to do so much more together than you can separate. Now, there's a very big difference between an interdependent team and a codependent team. Now, what's the difference? We're talking about a lot of dependent words here. So codependent just means that a dependent person comes to a independent person. Okay, so this person needs this other person, and is for example, Karl Marx. He's a very dependent person. He couldn't make any money on his own. He didn't go out and get a job. And so he was always asking Friedrich Engels for more money, more money, more money. He was a dependent person. That isn't an interdependent relationship. That is a codependent relationship. And that person, Karl Marx, stayed dependent his entire life. He couldn't do anything for himself. That isn't what we want. We want to first become independent and then second interdependent. And Stephen Covey actually says that you cannot be interdependent unless you first are independent. You cannot be a dependent person here. Now, there are different areas. It's not like you have to be independent in your entire life in order to be in every single area of your life in order to become interdependent. I might not know a lot about math, and so I'm dependent on other people to solve math problems for me. However, I can read on my own, and then I get together with somebody else who's really good at writing, and together we make a book. Okay, that would be an example of interdependence. Okay, and then the last habit here, sharpen the saw. I really like this habit. And he explains that it's a renewal. It's sharpening the saw. He gives the example of the two guys. There are two guys that are trying to cut down this tree with two axes, and I think it's a chainsaw actually. And it's either a chainsaw or an axe, one or the other. Or it's a saw. That's what it is. It's a saw. And they have the two guys are trying to cut down this tree. Both of them have these saws. And one of the guys, he's just working as hard as he can. He's working, slaving away all day long. Whereas the other guy, he works for about 30 minutes, and then he sits down for 30 minutes, and he starts sharpening his saw. And then he gets back after 15 minutes, he starts cutting away and sits down for 15. And it's like 30, 15, 30, 15. And the other guy starts making fun of him. He's like, dude, I'm going to cut down this tree so much faster than you. I'm working so much harder than you. What are you even doing over there? And he says, I'm sharpening the saw. Well, the guy ends up finishing like twice as fast as the guy who is just trying to cut down the tree because his saw blade was dull. And it's a lot harder to cut down a tree on a dull blade than it is on a sharp blade. And so the guy was thinking he was both smart and hardworking, not just hardworking. Okay? That's sharpening the saw and meaning that you're constantly going over these and reevaluating yourself on how your performance is. So quick recap, the big idea that I drew from this book and that we actually made our family values, independence and interdependence. Another word that we use for them is ownership and leadership, right? Now if you can think that way, the minute I started thinking that way, it just changed my whole perspective on things. It changed how I thought about things, how I interacted with people, thinking independent and then interdependent, working with other people as teams. You start thinking like that yourself, and you are going to become a lot more productive person and a lot happier in your life when you start working with other people.